The stench of fear and desperation permeated the auction warehouse on Kepler Station. Ulir Sarathi, Ula, to the few who had earned the right to address her with familiarity, stood on the metal platform. Harsh, artificial lights exposing every detail of her body to the hungry eyes below. Her feline ears flattened against her skull. The only outward sign of her disgust as the auctioneer droned on about her exceptional breeding and combat capabilities. "Note the musculature. Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, his voice amplified throughout the cavernous space. "A perfect specimen of the Sarathi bloodline, combat-trained from birth, yet still young enough for breeding purposes." He leered at the crowd. "The last fertile female of her kind that we know of." Ula's golden eyes remained fixed on a point above the crowd's heads. She had endured worse humiliations in her 23 years. The Sarathi were nearly extinct now. Her cat-like features and enhanced reflexes, making her kind valuable as warriors, bodyguards, and exotic playthings. That her own father had arranged this sale was merely the final betrayal in a lifetime of them. The bidding started at 50,000 credits, an outrageous sum that still somehow felt insulting. Ula studied the faces in the crowd: mining executives, pleasure house madams, private security contractors, all of them seeing not a person, but a possession. 100,000! A voice cut through the chattering bids, silencing the room. A human male stepped forward from the shadows at the back of the warehouse. Average height, broad-shouldered, with the measured movements of a professional soldier. His face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen too much but hadn't yet surrendered to cynicism. 100,000 credits, the auctioneer repeated, unable to hide his excitement. "Do I hear 110? A Verdani merchant in the front row raised a tentacle. 110. 150, the human countered immediately. The bidding escalated rapidly after that. 200,000, 250, 300,000 credits, a fortune that could buy a small spacecraft. Each time a new bid came in, the human at the back matched it without hesitation. 500,000 credits, he finally said, his voice carrying an edge that suggested he was done playing games. Silence fell across the warehouse. The auctioneer looked around hopefully, but no one raised a hand or voice. "Sold! To the gentleman in the back. Please proceed to processing for ownership transfer." Ula's hands clenched into fists, the only movement she allowed herself as her new owner approached the platform. Up close, she could see the small scars across his knuckles, the military-grade prosthetic left eye that glowed faintly blue around the iris. Ex-Marine, she guessed. Probably looking for a bodyguard who doubled as exotic arm candy. "Name's Emerson Hayes," he said quietly as he reached the platform. His voice pitched so only she could hear. "Follow my lead, and we might both get out of this alive." Before she could process his strange greeting, Hayes turned to the auctioneer. "I want the ownership contract. Now." "Of course, sir. If you'll just follow me to the processing office." "Bring it here," Hayes demanded. "I want everyone to witness this transaction." The auctioneer glanced nervously at the security guards positioned around the room, then nodded to an assistant who scurried away, returning moments later with a digital tablet and a printed certificate, the formal ownership document, complete with genetic verification codes and transfer authorization. Hayes took the tablet, pressed his thumb to the scanner, and authorized the astronomical payment. Then he took the certificate, holding it up for the crowd to see. "I want to make something perfectly clear," he announced, his voice carrying through the warehouse. "This is the only copy of this document that matters, correct?" He looked pointedly at the auctioneer. Yes, sir. The digital records are just for tracking. That certificate is the legally binding document under interstellar commerce law." Hayes nodded, then turned to Ula. "This," he said, handing her the certificate, "belongs to you." Confusion flickered across her face. "Burn it," Hayes said simply. The auctioneer's eyes widened. "Sir, you can't—" I just paid 500,000 credits. Hayes cut him off. I can do whatever I want with my purchase. He produced a small lighter from his pocket and held it out to Ula. Your choice. For 3 heartbeats. Ula stared at the flame, then at the document in her hand, the paper that legally defined her as property. With deliberate slowness, she brought the corner of the certificate to the flame. The paper caught quickly, orange fire racing along its edges. "What is happening here?" A voice boomed from the entrance. A security team was pushing through the now murmuring crowd. "We need to move," Hayes muttered. "Now." The burning certificate fell from Ula's fingers to the metal platform as Hayes grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the back of the stage. Someone in the crowd shouted. A security guard raised a weapon. "This way!" Hayes ducked behind the auction platform's curtain, revealing a maintenance corridor beyond. Ula followed, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a wild, unfamiliar sensation, possibility. Behind them, the warehouse erupted into chaos. Hayes moved with purpose through the service corridors, navigating the station's maze-like infrastructure with surprising familiarity. "Third intersection, we go left, then down the maintenance shaft," he said over his shoulder. "I have a ship docked on the commercial level." Ula's keen ears picked up the sound of pursuit. Heavy boots, shouted commands. "Why?" she demanded as they ran. "Why spend a fortune just to free me?" Hayes didn't slow down. "The why can wait. Right now. Focus on staying alive." They reached the intersection he'd mentioned, turned left, and found the access shaft. Hayes pulled open the hatch and gestured for her to go first. As she swung herself into the vertical passage, grabbing the ladder rungs, she heard him mutter, "Besides, it wasn't my fortune." The maintenance shaft descended 6 levels through the heart of Kepler Station. The rumble of massive environmental systems vibrated through the metal walls as they climbed downward. 2 levels from the bottom. Hayes paused on the ladder. "Security will be sweeping all major exits," he said. "We need a distraction." Ula, clinging to the ladder a few rungs below him, studied their surroundings. Her eyes, evolved for low-light hunting, quickly identified a bundle of cables running along the shaft wall. "Those are oxygen monitoring feeds," she said. "Cut them, and the emergency protocols will trigger a station-wide alert." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Creating a panic isn't exactly subtle." "You didn't seem concerned about subtle when you handed me a burning contract in front of 200 people. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair point." He pulled a multi-tool from his boot and severed the cables with a quick slice. Immediately, warning klaxons blared throughout the station. Emergency lighting bathed the shaft in pulsing red. "Now we move," Hayes said, descending the ladder with renewed urgency. When they reached the commercial level, Hayes led her through a series of increasingly narrow corridors, moving away from the main concourse where security would be concentrated. The station's announcement system was directing all civilians to evacuation shelters, exactly the distraction they needed. "Docking Bay 12, Hayes said, as they approached a heavy security door. He pressed his hand to the scanner, and the door slid open, revealing a small hangar where a compact interstellar vessel waited. The ship wasn't pretty. Its hull bore the scars of multiple repairs, but its lines suggested speed and maneuverability. "Get aboard," Hayes ordered, moving to a control panel near the hangar's outer door. "Start the pre-flight sequence. Authorization code Hayes Echo 79. Ula hesitated for only a moment before sprinting across the hangar floor and up the ship's boarding ramp. Inside, the vessel was surprisingly well maintained, its systems clean and organized despite the battered exterior. She found the cockpit and activated the main console. "Voice authorization accepted." The ship's AI responded. "Welcome aboard, Captain Hayes." "Initiate pre-flight sequence," Ula commanded. Initiating pre-flight, all systems nominal. Through the viewport, she saw Hayes still working at the control panel. The hangar's outer door was beginning to slide open, revealing the star-filled blackness beyond. Just as the gap widened enough for their ship to pass through, the inner door to the hangar burst open. 3 security officers rushed in, weapons raised. "Hayes!" Ula shouted. He was already running for the ship, ducking as energy pulses sizzled past his head. One blast caught the edge of his jacket, scorching the material, but he made it up the ramp, slapping the closure control as he passed. "Get us out of here!" he shouted, diving into the co-pilot seat beside her. Ula's hands flew across the controls. Muscle memory from years of forced pilot training taking over. The ship lifted off the hangar floor, pivoted toward the still opening outer door, and accelerated through the gap with barely a meter of clearance on either side. "Station defenses will be online any second," Hayes warned, strapping himself in. "We need to break their targeting lock before they can bring the heavy guns to bear." Ula didn't respond, her complete focus on the flight controls as she sent the ship into a spiraling dive away from the station, making them a difficult target. Behind them, the first defensive shots flared against the blackness of space, missing their rapidly moving vessel. "Coming up on FTL range," she announced. "Coordinates?" "Already programmed," Hayes said, fingers dancing across his console. "Jump on my mark." The ship shuddered as a grazing shot from the station's defenses struck their aft shields. Warning lights flashed across the console. "Mark!" Ula slammed the control forward. Stars streaked into lines around them as the ship leapt into faster-than-light travel, leaving Kepler Station and its pursuit far behind. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engines and the soft beeping of navigation systems, the only sounds in the cockpit. Finally, Ula turned to face the man who had just spent a fortune to free her, then risked his life to ensure that freedom. "Now," she said, her golden eyes fixed on his. "Tell me why." Hayes leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "That's a long story." "We appear to have time," she replied, gesturing to the FTL indicator, showing they had hours before returning to normal space. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "The short version? I was part of the military expedition that wiped out most of your people 12 years ago. I've spent every day since trying to find a way to make that right." The revelation hit Ula like a physical blow. The cleansing of Sarathi Prime, the euphemism humans used for the genocide of her people. She had been 11 years old when human forces had descended on their homeworld, claiming to be eliminating a terrorist threat. In reality, they had been clearing valuable territory for mineral extraction. "You were there?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "7th Marine Division. We were told your people were developing biological weapons to use against human colonies." His artificial eye dimmed slightly, as if the memory itself affected its function. "By the time some of us realized the truth, it was too late." Ula's claws extended involuntarily, her muscles coiling with the instinct to attack. This man had participated in the slaughter of her family, her friends, her entire world. "I should kill you where you sit," she hissed. Hayes made no move to defend himself. "You have every right. But before you do, know that there are 7 other Sarathi I've helped free over the past 5 years. They're waiting at our destination, a hidden colony where your people are trying to rebuild." Her claws remained extended, but confusion joined her rage. "What hidden colony?" The survivors were scattered across a dozen systems, sold into slavery or forced into refugee camps. "Not all of them. Some escaped the initial attack, led by a warrior named Misha. They established a settlement on an abandoned mining world beyond the outer rim. It's where we're headed now." The name sent another shock through Ula's system. Misha lives. Misha had been her mother's closest friend, a legendary fighter who had taught Ula her first combat forms. Hayes nodded. "She leads the colony. There are 37 Sarathi there now, including the ones I've helped free." He paused. It's not much against the thousands who died, but it's something. Ula slowly retracted her claws, her mind racing. If what he said was true, why should I believe you? You shouldn't, he answered simply. Not yet, but you will when we get there. Before she could respond, a warning chime sounded from the navigation console. Hayes frowned, checking the display. That's not possible, he muttered. We're being followed. Ula turned to her own console. Nothing should be able to track us through an FTL jump. Unless they placed a quantum tracker on the ship before we left? Hayes pulled up the external scanner displays. There, 3 vessels, matching our course precisely. Bounty hunters? Ula asked. Or worse. Hayes's expression darkened. Your father's cronies. At the mention of her father, Ula felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Korath of the First Clan had once been a respected leader among their people. After the cleansing, he had used his diplomatic connections to save himself, and to position himself as a valuable asset to the human corporations that now controlled what remained of Sarathi territory. He had kept Ula as a bargaining chip for years, finally selling her when a better opportunity presented itself. If Korath sent them, they won't stop, she said. Then, we change the game. Hayes activated the ship's communication system. This is Captain Emerson Hayes to pursuing vessels. Be advised that I've set this ship's reactor to overload if your approach comes within 5,000 kilometers. Back off now. The response was immediate. A holographic projection that materialized above the console. The face that appeared made Ula's blood run cold. Korath himself stared out at them, his once proud features now cold and calculating. He wore the insignia of a colonial administrative advisor, the title given to those who collaborated with the human authorities. Emerson Hayes, Korath said, his voice carrying the purring undertone characteristic of all Sarathi. Return my daughter immediately, and I may let you live. She's not property to be returned, Hayes replied evenly. The ownership contract no longer exists. Korath's laugh held no humor. Contracts can be reissued. Ula carries the last pure bloodline of the First Clan. She belongs with her people. The people you sold out to save yourself? Ula couldn't contain her contempt. Korath's eyes narrowed at the sight of his daughter. You understand nothing of what I've done to ensure our survival. The prophecy must be fulfilled, and your role in it is essential. What prophecy? Hayes asked, glancing at Ula. An old superstition, she said dismissively, though her heart raced at the mention. The prophecy of renewal was ancient Sarathi mythology, a belief that after a great devastation, a child born of the First Clan would unite the scattered remnants of their people and lead them to a new homeworld. Not superstition, Korath insisted. Truth. Ula, you carry the future of our species. Your mate has been chosen, a union that will produce the child of prophecy. Hayes looked at Ula with confusion, but she kept her eyes fixed on her father's image. Is that why you sold me? To deliver me to this chosen mate? The pieces suddenly connected in her mind. The Verdani merchant at the auction. He was your buyer all along. Precisely, Korath confirmed. The Verdani Consortium controls 3 habitable worlds. In exchange for the child of prophecy, they have agreed to grant our people a continent on one of them. You sold your daughter to breed a political bargaining chip, Hayes said, disgust evident in his voice. I secured a future for our people, Korath countered. A future you are now jeopardizing. Return her, or face the consequences. Hayes leaned forward. Here are the only consequences that matter. If your ships don't back off immediately, I'll drop this vessel out of FTL in the middle of the Ceres asteroid field and take my chances with the rocks. How much is your prophecy worth to you then? Korath's expression hardened. You have 12 hours to reconsider your position. Hayes, after that, we will take her by force. The hologram disappeared. Hayes immediately began adjusting their course. He's bluffing about the 12 hours. They'll make their move much sooner. Ula was still processing her father's words. The child of prophecy, she murmured. Then, with sudden clarity that made her stomach lurch, Hayes, I'm pregnant. His hands froze over the controls. What? 5 weeks, she said, her voice hollow. Genetic manipulation during my last medical examination. I didn't know the purpose until now. She met his shocked gaze. My father intends to use my child as a political token. Hayes absorbed this information, his expression shifting from shock to grim determination. Then we have even more reason to reach the colony. Dr. Voss is there. She specializes in Sarathi medicine. She can help. You don't understand, Ula said. If what my father believes is true, this child could be the future of my species. The prophecy speaks of a child who will unite our scattered people and lead them to a new home. And you believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. She placed a protective hand over her still flat abdomen. But I know I won't let my child become a political pawn, prophecy or not. Hayes nodded. Then we stick to the plan, but with modifications. He pulled up a star chart. There's an old mining facility in the Tannhauser Belt, about 3 hours from our current position. The electromagnetic radiation there will mask our signature long enough to make some adjustments to our ship. What kind of adjustments? A hint of his earlier smile returned. The kind that make Korath regret following us. The mining facility floated in the shadow of a massive gas giant, its abandoned structures half hidden in swirling bands of metallic hydrogen clouds. Hayes guided their ship into a docking bay that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The automatic systems still functional but sluggish with age. We have maybe 2 hours before they track us here, he said, as they secured the vessel. I need you to help me modify our ship's energy signature while I prepare a surprise for our pursuers. As they worked, Ula found herself studying Hayes with new eyes. His movements were efficient, his knowledge of the ship's systems impressive. This was not a man who had stumbled into a rescue mission on a whim. How long have you been planning this? She asked, as they recalibrated the engine output to disguise their vessel's signature. Hayes didn't look up from his work. 5 years for the general mission, 3 months for you specifically. Once I learned Korath was planning to sell you. And the others you claim to have rescued? Not a claim. Fact. He paused, meeting her gaze. I left the Marines after what happened on Sarathi Prime. Spent 2 years drinking myself into oblivion before Misha found me. Misha sought you out? Ula couldn't hide her surprise. She had identified several of the officers involved in the attack. Came to kill me, actually. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long scar that could only have been made by Sarathi claws. We came to an understanding instead. What kind of understanding? That redemption comes through action, not remorse. He rolled his sleeve back down. I had resources, connections. She had survivors who needed help. We've been working together ever since, identifying enslaved Sarathi and finding ways to free them. Ula absorbed this as they continued their work. The story aligned with what she knew of Misha. Pragmatic, fierce, but always focused on the survival of their people above all else. There, Hayes said, closing an access panel. The ship now broadcasts the signature of a standard mining transport, and I've loaded our little surprise into the aft cargo hold. What exactly is this surprise? A modified reactor core from one of the facility's scrapped vessels. When detonated, it'll create an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disrupt their systems temporarily, giving us time to escape. Ula raised an eyebrow. You just happen to know how to convert a reactor core into an EMP device? Special Forces training has its uses. Hayes checked his wrist display. We should move. Their scouts will be here soon. They had just completed pre-flight checks when the facility's ancient warning system activated. Proximity alerts, signaling approaching vessels. Right on schedule, Hayes muttered. Hang on. This exit's going to be tight. He detached from the docking bay, without the usual safety protocols, letting the ship drift on minimal power to avoid detection. The gas giant's gravitational pull slowly drew them into its upper atmosphere, the vessel buffeted by intense winds and radiation. "They're deploying scout ships," Ula reported, watching the scanner. "3 of them, searching the facility." "Perfect." Hayes activated a remote detonator. "Let's give them something to find." On the facility they'd just left, a blinding flash erupted from the docking bay. The electromagnetic pulse rolled outward, catching the scout ships in its invisible wave. Their engines sputtered and died, leaving them drifting helplessly. "Main engines now," Hayes ordered, and Ula engaged the drive system. Their ship shot forward, burning through the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere and out into open space. "That won't hold them for long," she warned. "Long enough. We've changed our signature and our trajectory. By the time they recover, we'll be halfway to the colony." Ula nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to their arrival. A hidden colony of Sarathi survivors. It seemed too much to hope for after so many years believing her people were doomed to extinction. And yet, if it were true— "Tell me about this colony," she said, as they accelerated away from the gas giant. "How have they remained hidden for so long?" Hayes plotted their new course before answering. The planet was an abandoned chromium mining operation, Nexus 4 on the old charts. After the company went bankrupt, it was written off as depleted. In reality, the miners had barely scratched the surface. "And no one has discovered them in all this time?" "The planet's location is its best defense, buried in a nebula that plays havoc with standard sensors. Plus, they've developed jamming technology that masks any signs of settlement. From orbit, it looks completely deserted." "How many survivors, really?" 37 Sarathi, as I said, plus about 200 humans and other species who've joined the colony for various reasons. Political refugees, deserters, people looking to disappear. He glanced at her. "It's not paradise, but it's free." Ula considered this. "And they just accepted you? After what humans did to our world?" "Not at first. I spent my first year living in a secured area, basically a prisoner who was occasionally allowed to leave for missions." His expression softened slightly. "It got better over time. Results tend to change people's minds." Before Ula could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared. Hayes swore, checking the scanner. "Impossible. They couldn't have recovered that quickly." He magnified the image. "It's a tractor beam. They must have had a 4th ship hanging back, waiting for us to run." Ula felt the subtle shift as their vessel was caught in the invisible grip of the pursuing ship's technology. Their engines strained against the pull, but the larger vessel's power was overwhelming. "The EMP device," she said suddenly. "Could we trigger it here? Disrupt their tractor beam?" Hayes shook his head. "We used it already. But—" His eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "We could overload our own reactor, a controlled burst through the rear deflectors. That could damage our engines beyond repair. Better damaged than captured." Hayes was already moving toward the engineering section. "I need you to maintain our heading and be ready to hit maximum acceleration the moment the tractor beam fails." Ula took control of the pilot station, watching as the distance between their ship and the pursuer steadily decreased. Through the rear cameras, she could see the massive vessel now, a military-grade cruiser bearing Colonial Defense Force markings. Her father had more influence than she'd realized. In the engine room, Hayes worked frantically, rerouting power conduits and bypassing safety protocols. The ship's AI kept issuing warnings, which he systematically overrode. "Ready," he called over the intercom. "Brace yourself. This is going to get rough." Ula secured herself in the pilot's chair. "On your mark. 3, 2, 1, now." The ship bucked violently as a surge of energy blasted from its rear deflectors. On the scanner, Ula saw the tractor beam connection flicker and then vanish as the pursuing ship's forward systems overloaded. "Now!" Hayes shouted. Ula slammed the engines to maximum. Their ship leapt forward, straining against the sudden acceleration. Warning lights flashed across every console as the overtaxed systems struggled to maintain integrity. "We're clear," she reported. "But the engines are redlining. We can't maintain this speed for long." Hayes returned to the cockpit, his face streaked with sweat and engine oil. "We don't need long. Calculate a jump to these coordinates." He transmitted a set of numbers to her console. Ula frowned at the destination. "This isn't where we discussed. These coordinates are in the middle of the Ceres asteroid field." "Exactly. We're going to do exactly what I threatened. Drop out of FTL in the asteroid field. Then we make a blind microjump to the actual colony coordinates." "A blind microjump is incredibly dangerous," Ula protested. "The margin for error is better than the certainty of capture." Hayes checked the scanner. "They're already recovering. We jump now, or we don't jump at all." With a grim nod, Ula locked in the coordinates. "FTL in 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into streaks of light as the ship leapt into faster-than-light travel. The pursuing vessel vanished behind them, though Ula knew it would follow as soon as its systems recovered. "How long until we reach the asteroid field?" she asked. 17 minutes. Hayes began running diagnostics on their damaged systems. "The reactor overload fried some of our secondary systems, but the main engines and navigation are holding. We should be able to make both jumps." Ula nodded, then winced suddenly, placing a hand over her abdomen. Hayes noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just stress." His eyes narrowed with concern. "The baby?" "Is fine," she insisted, though in truth, she wasn't certain. Sarathi pregnancies were typically robust, but hers was far from typical. If her father had indeed arranged genetic manipulation, there was no telling what complications might arise. Hayes studied her for a moment longer, then turned back to his console. "When we reach the colony, Dr. Voss will examine you immediately. She's the best xenobiologist in the Outer Rim." "You keep mentioning this doctor," Ula observed. "Is she special to you?" A shadow passed over Hayes's face. "She saved my life when I first arrived at the colony. I was in bad shape, physically and otherwise." "The guilt," Ula said quietly. He nodded. "War does things to you, especially when you discover you've been fighting for a lie." They fell silent after that, each absorbed in their own thoughts as the ship hurtled through hyperspace. Ula found herself wondering about the colony that awaited them, a community of survivors led by Misha, a woman she had believed dead for 12 years. Would they accept her? Would they know of the prophecy her father believed in so fervently? More importantly, would they try to claim her child for themselves? The minutes ticked by until the navigation system signaled their approach to the Ceres asteroid field. Hayes returned to the co-pilot's chair. "Ready for Phase 1, he said, dropping out of FTL in 3, 2, 1. The stars snapped back into pinpoints as the ship returned to normal space, directly in the heart of the Ceres asteroid field. Massive chunks of rock and ice floated around them in a chaotic dance, some as small as their ship, others the size of small moons. "Proximity alert!" Ula called out, as a boulder the size of a shuttle tumbled past their bow. Hayes was already calculating their next jump. "Engaging evasive maneuvers. Be ready for the micro-jump on my mark." Ula guided the ship through the deadly maze of asteroids, her enhanced reflexes giving her precious split seconds of advantage as she anticipated the movements of the cosmic debris. Twice, they came within meters of collision, the ship's hull groaning in protest at the rapid changes in direction. "Our pursuers just dropped out of FTL," Hayes reported. "They're at the edge of the field, trying to reacquire our position." "They're welcome to it," Ula muttered, spinning the ship around a particularly large asteroid. How much longer until we can jump? Coordinates set. Hayes finished the calculations. This jump has to be precise. We'll be navigating blind for 7 seconds before emerging directly in the colony's approach corridor. 7 seconds is a long time to be blind in hyperspace. Which is why no one would expect us to try it. He gave her a tight smile. Ready? Ula nodded, her hands steady on the controls despite the danger. Ready. Micro jump in 3, 2, 1, now. The stars stretched once more as the ship made its desperate leap. For 7 terrifying seconds, they flew without conventional navigation, relying entirely on Hayes's pre-programmed coordinates. The ship shuddered and creaked, the strain of 2 rapid jumps testing its structural integrity to the limit. Then, with a lurch that sent them both pitching forward against their restraints, they dropped back into normal space. Through the viewport, a rust-colored planet loomed before them, partially obscured by a swirling nebula that cast an eerie, shifting light across its surface. Nexus 4, Hayes said quietly. Welcome to your new home. Before Ula could respond, a communication alert sounded. A gruff, female voice came through the speakers. Unidentified vessel. You have entered restricted space. State your business, or be fired upon. Hayes activated the comm system. This is Captain Emerson Hayes returning from mission Sarathi 9. Authorization code, Misha 773. There was a pause. Then, identity confirmed. Welcome back, Captain. We've been monitoring your approach vector. You have pursuers? Temporarily delayed, but they'll be coming. We need immediate clearance to land and a medical team standing by. Understood. Follow the transmitted approach coordinates. Security teams will be on alert. Hayes acknowledged, then began their descent toward the planet. As they broke through the upper atmosphere, Ula got her first glimpse of the colony, a sprawling complex nestled in a valley between towering red cliffs. What had once been mining facilities had been converted into a self-contained settlement, with agricultural domes, residential units, and defensive installations creating a fortified community. It's larger than I expected, she said. It's grown substantially in the last few years. The chromium mining operation has been restarted. Gives us a legitimate reason for ships to come and go. Plus, it funds our other activities. They landed on a pad near what appeared to be a medical facility, where a reception committee already waited. As the ship powered down, Hayes turned to Ula. Whatever happens next, he said solemnly, know that you are free here. No one will force you to do anything against your will, not even for the sake of your people. Ula met his gaze, seeing the sincerity there. Thank you, she said simply. As they descended the boarding ramp, Ula scanned the small group waiting for them. Most were human, but standing at their center was a figure that made her heart leap, a female Sarathi, tall and proud, with the distinctive silver-streaked fur of a warrior who had undergone the rites of leadership. Misha, Ula breathed. The older Sarathi woman stepped forward, her golden eyes widening in recognition. Little Ula, she said, her voice carrying the same purring undertone as all their kind. You've grown strong. You're alive, Ula said, still hardly believing it. All this time, Misha confirmed. Rebuilding, surviving. Her gaze sharpened as she noticed Ula's protective stance, one hand unconsciously placed over her abdomen. You carry a child. It wasn't a question. Sarathi could sense such things in each other, an evolutionary adaptation from their ancestors. Yes, Ula admitted. A manipulation arranged by my father. Misha's expression darkened. Korath. I should have known he would go this far. She turned to Hayes. You were pursued. Colonial Defense Force vessel, he confirmed. Likely with Korath himself aboard. We gained some time with a reactor overload and a blind jump through the Ceres field. But they'll track us eventually. Then we prepare. Misha gestured to a human woman in medical attire. Dr. Voss, Please take Ula to the medical center immediately. Full examination, priority clearance. The doctor stepped forward, a tall, auburn-haired woman with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Of course. This way, please, she said to Ula. Hayes moved to follow, but Misha placed a restraining hand on his arm. We need to discuss defense preparations. Dr. Voss will take good care of her. Reluctantly, Hayes nodded. I'll join you as soon as I can, he promised Ula. As Dr. Voss led her toward the medical facility, Ula found herself looking back at Hayes, the human who had risked everything to free her, now deep in urgent conversation with Misha. For the first time in years, she felt something other than rage or resignation, something dangerously close to hope. The medical center was surprisingly advanced, its equipment rivaling anything Ula had seen in the core worlds. Dr. Voss worked efficiently, conducting a thorough examination while explaining each step. Your pregnancy appears stable, she said, studying a holographic display of Ula's internal systems. But there are unusual genetic markers I'd like to investigate further. What kind of markers? Ula asked, apprehension creeping into her voice. Nothing immediately concerning, Dr. Voss assured her. But the fetal DNA shows signs of deliberate engineering, specific sequences that don't appear naturally in either Sarathi or human genetics. Human? Ula sat up sharply. The father is human? Dr. Voss looked surprised. Yes. Did you not know? The paternal DNA is definitely human, though without a sample for comparison. I can't identify the specific donor. Ula's mind raced. Her father had arranged for a human to father her child? It made no sense according to the prophecy, which specifically mentioned a union of pure Sarathi bloodlines. Can you tell how far along I am precisely? 5 weeks and 3 days, Dr. Voss replied. The development is accelerated compared to a standard Sarathi pregnancy, likely another effect of the genetic engineering. And the child is healthy. Remarkably so. The hybrid physiology appears stable, though I'm detecting unusual activity in the cerebral development. Dr. Voss adjusted the holographic display to focus on the tiny form's developing brain. These neural patterns are unique. I've never seen anything quite like them. Before Ula could ask more questions, the facility's alarm system activated, a pulsing red alert that echoed through the building. Dr. Voss moved quickly to a communication console. Voss here. What's happening? Perimeter alert, came the tense reply. Multiple ships entering the atmosphere. Colonial Defense Force markings. All personnel to defensive positions. They found us sooner than expected, Dr. Voss said grimly. She turned to Ula. You should remain here. The medical center is in the most protected section of the colony. Ula slid from the examination table. No. If my father is coming, I need to be there. Captain Hayes left explicit instructions. I don't care what Hayes said, Ula interrupted. This is my fight too. Dr. Voss studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. But stay close to me. The stress is not good for your condition. They hurried through the corridors, joining the flow of colony members, moving with purpose toward defensive positions. Outside, the sky had darkened with the approach of evening, the nebula's glow casting an eerie purple light across the settlement. In the distance, Ula could see the bright flares of ships descending through the atmosphere, at least 3 large vessels and several smaller craft. They found Hayes and Misha at the colony's command center, a converted mining administration building with a panoramic view of the valley. Tactical displays showed the approaching ships and the colony's defensive capabilities. You should be in the medical center, Hayes said when he saw Ula. The baby is fine, she replied. Half human, apparently. Hayes's expression flickered with surprise, but he quickly refocused on the tactical situation. Their approach vector suggests they know exactly where we are. So much for our stealth systems. Korath always had resources, Misha said grimly. The question is what he wants. Me, Ula said. And my child, he believes in the prophecy of renewal. Misha's eyes narrowed. That old superstition. Even if it were true, a half-human child would not fulfill it. Unless that was the prophecy all along, Dr. Voss interjected. Everyone turned to look at her. I've been studying the ancient Sarathi texts since I joined the colony. The original prophecy speaks of a child of two worlds who will bridge the divide. Most interpreted that as referring to the two main Sarathi clans. But what if it meant two species? Before anyone could respond, the communication system activated. On the main screen, Koroth's face appeared, his expression cold and determined. Misha, he acknowledged. After all these years. Koroth, she replied with equal coldness. Still betraying your own people. I see. I have never betrayed our people, he snarled. Everything I have done has been for their survival. Including selling your daughter? Hayes stepped into view. Koroth's eyes fixed on him with hatred. The human who thinks he can atone for genocide by saving a few slaves. How noble. What do you want, Koroth? Misha demanded. What is rightfully mine? My daughter and the child she carries. The future of our species. Ula moved forward, facing her father directly. I am not yours to claim, neither is my child. You understand nothing, Koroth said dismissively. The prophecy is not what you think, Ula interrupted. The child is half human. Your precious pure bloodline has been diluted. For the first time, Koroth appeared genuinely shocked. Impossible! The genetic sequencing was precise. Was altered, Dr. Voss said, joining the conversation. Either by someone in your organization or by natural mutation. The father is definitively human. Koroth's face contorted with rage. This changes nothing. The child must still be under proper Sarathi guidance, not raised in a colony of misfits and traitors. Enough talk, Misha said sharply. You have no claim here, Koroth. Leave now, or face the consequences. You are outnumbered and outgunned, he replied. Surrender my daughter, or I will reduce your colony to ash. The screen went dark, immediately. Hayes turned to the defense coordinator. Status of the shield generators? Operational, but they won't withstand a sustained bombardment from vessels that size. They're not here to bombard us, Misha said. They want Ula alive. They'll send ground forces first. As if confirming her words, the tactical display showed smaller craft detaching from the main vessels, troop carriers, descending toward the valley floor. Defensive positions, Misha ordered. Security teams to the main gate and eastern perimeter. Medical personnel to the shelter. She turned to Ula. You should go with Dr. Voss. No, Ula said firmly. I will face my father myself. Hayes started to protest, but Misha held up a hand. It's her right. She studied Ula for a moment. But not alone. The next hour was a blur of preparation as the colony mobilized for defense. The residents, human, Sarathi, and other species alike, moved with the coordination of people who had trained for this possibility. Defensive barriers were erected, weapons distributed, non-combatants moved to protected shelters. From the command center, they watched as the first troop carriers landed just beyond the colony's perimeter. Soldiers in Colonial Defense Force uniforms deployed in formation, accompanied by combat drones and heavy weapons. They're not attacking immediately, Hayes observed, setting up a perimeter instead. Preparing for a siege, Misha agreed. Koroth wants to force our hand. As darkness fell completely, the standoff continued. The colony's lights were dimmed to preserve the effectiveness of their defensive systems, leaving the valley illuminated primarily by the nebula's purple glow and the harsh spotlights from the encircling forces. Hayes found Ula at an observation post, watching the enemy positions through a tactical scope. How are you feeling? He asked quietly. Like I'm responsible for bringing this down on all of you, she replied, without looking away from the scope. This was always a possibility, he said. The colony has survived worse. Has it? She finally turned to face him. Dr. Voss told me about the baby, that it's developing unusual neural patterns. Hayes nodded. She briefed us during the preparations. Some kind of accelerated development in the limbic and prefrontal regions. And you don't find that concerning? Concerning, yes. Surprising, not entirely. He hesitated. Ula, there's something I need to tell you. He was interrupted by an alert from his communication device. They're moving, Misha's voice reported. Multiple breaches at the eastern perimeter. On our way, Hayes responded. To Ula, he said, this will have to wait. They hurried to the eastern section of the colony, where the first clashes had already begun. Colonial forces had breached the outer barrier and were engaging with the colony's defenders in a series of skirmishes. The invaders were well-equipped and disciplined, but the defenders had the advantage of familiar terrain and prepared positions. Ula and Hayes joined Misha at a command post overlooking the conflict. They're probing our defenses, Misha explained, testing for weaknesses before committing their main force. Where's Koroth? Ula demanded, scanning the battlefield. Still aboard his ship, most likely, Hayes answered. He won't risk himself until... A blinding light suddenly erupted from the center of the colony, followed by the distinctive hum of a transport beam. All three of them turned to see a group of figures materializing in the main plaza. A dozen heavily armed soldiers, surrounding a single Sarathi male. Koroth, Misha hissed. They must have portable transport technology. That's impossible, Hayes protested. The colony's shield should prevent any transport beams from penetrating. Unless someone provided them with the shield frequency, Misha said grimly. We have a traitor? Ula asked, alarmed. We'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to contain this breach. Misha activated her communicator. Security teams to the main plaza. Transport breach. High-value target present. As colony defenders converged on the plaza, Koroth's voice boomed through an amplification device. Attention! Residents of this illegal settlement, I am Koroth of the First Clan, acting under the authority of the colonial administration. Surrender Ulier Sarathi immediately, and the rest of you will be granted amnesty. He's lying, Hayes said quietly. The moment they have you, they'll eliminate everyone who knows about this place. Ula's expression hardened. Then I'll go to him on my own terms. Before either Hayes or Misha could stop her, she vaulted over the command post's barrier and began making her way toward the plaza. Ula, wait! Hayes called after her. But she was already moving with the fluid grace of her species, using the shadows and structures for cover as she approached her father's position. Koroth saw her before she reached the plaza, his enhanced senses picking up her movement in the darkness. Ula, he called out. Come to your senses. This resistance is pointless. She emerged from the shadows, standing tall despite the weapons trained on her from all sides. Hello, Father, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. Is this how you honor our people's tradition of hospitality? With an armed invasion? Our traditions died with our homeworld, he replied coldly. Only survival matters now. Is that what you tell yourself to justify selling your own daughter? She took another step forward. To rationalize collaborating with those who slaughtered our people? Politics requires compromise, Koroth said. Something your mother never understood. The mention of her mother sent a surge of anger through Ula. Don't you dare speak of her. She died defending our home while you were negotiating your surrender. And what did her death accomplish? Koroth demanded. Nothing. I, meanwhile, have secured a future for our people. The Verdani Consortium has agreed to grant us territory on Proxima III, a new homeworld. In exchange for what? My child? Ula placed a protective hand over her abdomen. A child that isn't even fully Sarathi? Koroth's eyes narrowed. So it's true. You've been contaminated with human DNA. His gaze shifted to something behind her. I presume? Ula turned to see Hayes approaching, his weapon lowered but ready. Stay back, she warned him. Not a chance, he replied, moving to stand beside her. Korath studied Hayes with contempt. Of all the humans to soil our bloodline, it had to be one responsible for our people's destruction. Hayes didn't flinch from the accusation. I can't change the past, but I've spent every day since trying to make amends. Amends? Korath laughed bitterly. You think freeing a few slaves erases the blood on your hands? Our civilization is gone because of people like you. Our civilization is not gone. Misha's voice rang out as she joined them in the plaza. It lives in every Sarathi who remembers our ways, our values, including the one you've forgotten. Korath, we do not sacrifice our children for political gain. More colony defenders had gathered now, forming a perimeter around the standoff. Korath's soldiers shifted nervously, outnumbered but still dangerous with their advanced weapons. This is your last opportunity, Korath said. Surrender my daughter, or face the consequences. She is not yours to claim, Hayes replied. The contract was destroyed. Contracts can be rewritten. Korath withdrew a digital tablet from his jacket. This one grants me guardianship rights over all Sarathi females of childbearing age, signed by the colonial administration itself. That document has no authority here, Misha countered. It has authority everywhere the colonial fleet operates, Korath retorted. And as you can see, they are very much present. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, if not for what happened next. Ula suddenly gasped, doubling over in pain. Hayes caught her before she could fall, concern etched on his face. What's wrong? The baby, she whispered. Something's happening. Dr. Voss pushed through the crowd, rushing to Ula's side. Get her to the medical center now! No one is taking her anywhere, Korath ordered, signaling his soldiers to raise their weapons. Your grandchild is in distress, Dr. Voss said sharply. If you want this prophecy fulfilled, you'll let me treat her immediately. Korath hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. My men will accompany her. Fine, Misha agreed. But only two, and they surrender their weapons at the door. Under this uneasy truce, they transported Ula to the medical center, a tense procession through the colony with defenders and invaders walking side by side, watching each other warily. Hayes never left Ula's side, supporting her as waves of pain washed over her. In the medical center, Dr. Voss quickly hooked Ula to a series of monitors, her expression growing increasingly concerned as she studied the readings. The pregnancy is accelerating at an unprecedented rate, she explained. The fetus has developed to the equivalent of a third trimester stage in a matter of hours. That's impossible, Korath said, though his voice lacked conviction. The genetic engineering you authorized has had unintended consequences, Dr. Voss replied coldly. The human DNA has catalyzed a reaction with the modifications you made. Can you stop it? Hayes asked. Dr. Voss shook her head. I can only monitor and respond. The process appears to be self-regulating. The child is essentially controlling its own development. Controlling its, Hayes began, but was interrupted as Ula cried out in pain. It's coming, Dr. Voss announced. Now! What followed was a blur of activity, as the medical team prepared for an emergency delivery. Korath was forced to wait outside the delivery room, but Hayes remained, holding Ula's hand through each contraction. The accelerated pregnancy had taken its toll on her body, but her Sarathi physiology, designed for survival under extreme conditions, adapted remarkably. 3 hours later, amidst the backdrop of an armed standoff that had the entire colony holding its breath, Ula gave birth to a daughter. The child was extraordinary from her first breath. Her tiny body bore the distinctive markings of Sarathi heritage, the beginnings of what would become feline ears, the slight elongation of the pupils in her golden eyes. But her skin tone and facial structure clearly showed her human parentage as well. Most remarkable, however, was the subtle luminescence that seemed to emanate from her skin, a soft glow that pulsed with her heartbeat. She's beautiful, Hayes whispered, staring at the newborn with wonder. Ula, exhausted but alert, cradled her daughter close. "She's a miracle." She looked up at Hayes. "You wanted to tell me something before the attack. What was it?" Before he could answer, the door to the delivery room slid open. Korath stood there, flanked by his guards and Misha. "Let me see the child," he demanded. Dr. Voss moved protectively toward Ula. "The mother needs rest." "The child is all that matters now," Korath insisted, pushing past her. As he approached the bed, something unexpected happened. The newborn's luminescence suddenly intensified, bathing the room in a warm, golden light. Everyone present felt a wave of something wash over them. Not quite emotion, not quite thought, but a presence that touched their minds directly. Korath stopped in his tracks, his expression shifting from determination to confusion. "What is this?" he whispered. "The prophecy," Misha said softly, "but not as you interpreted it." The child's glow continued to pulse, and with each wave, Ula could feel a connection forming, not just with her daughter, but with everyone in the room. Images and emotions flowed between them: Hayes's guilt and hope, Dr. Voss's compassion and scientific curiosity, Misha's fierce protectiveness of her people, and most surprisingly, Korath's complex tangle of ambition, fear, and genuine belief that he was saving their species. "Empathic resonance," Dr. Voss said in wonder, checking her instruments. "She's generating a quantum field that somehow connects consciousness across species barriers." The effect extended beyond the delivery room, throughout the medical center, then the colony, and finally reaching the encircling forces. The newborn's influence spread. Weapons were lowered, tensions eased, minds open to understanding the perspectives of those they had considered enemies moments before. In the delivery room, Korath approached the bed slowly, his face transformed by wonder. "A bridge between worlds," he murmured, echoing the prophecy. "Not a conqueror or a political token, but a unifier." "Her name is Hope," Ula said firmly, looking first at her father, then at Hayes. "And she belongs to herself, not to any prophecy or plan." Korath nodded slowly. "I see that now." He looked around the room, at the humans and Sarathi standing together, united by the child's gift. "Perhaps I have been wrong about many things." Outside, the standoff was dissolving as colonial soldiers and colony defenders found themselves unable to maintain their hostility in the presence of the newborn's influence. Communications from Korath's ship reported the same effect there, a wave of understanding and empathy sweeping through everyone within range. In the days that followed, an uneasy truce evolved into cautious cooperation. Korath, stripped of his certainty but still a skilled diplomat, began negotiations with Misha and the colony leadership. The colonial forces withdrew to a respectful distance, their mission parameters suddenly unclear in the face of this unexpected development. The child Hope continued to grow at an accelerated rate, though the pace slowed as she reached developmental milestones. Her empathic abilities stabilized, becoming more controlled, but no less profound. She could not force others to change their minds or hearts, but she could create a space where genuine understanding was possible, a gift beyond price in a galaxy fractured by species conflicts and old hatreds. For Ula and Hayes, the path forward was both simpler and more complex. Their relationship, born in crisis and cemented through shared danger, now had room to develop naturally. Hayes's guilt over his role in the Sarathi genocide would never disappear entirely. But in Hope's presence, he found something he had never expected: forgiveness, not just from others, but from himself. One evening, weeks after Hope's birth, Ula found Hayes standing on the observation deck overlooking the colony. The settlement had grown in the aftermath of the confrontation, with new arrivals, including several Sarathi who had heard rumors of the miracle child, expanding its boundaries and resources. "Thinking about leaving?" she asked. coming to stand beside him. He shook his head. Just the opposite. Thinking about staying, permanently. Ula studied his profile, noting the ease in his stance that hadn't been there when they first met. You've found your redemption. Not redemption, he corrected. Purpose. There's a difference. She nodded, understanding. Hope needs her father. And her mother. He turned to face her. And whatever you decide you want me to be to you. Ula considered this. Their relationship had developed in the crucible of danger and necessity. Now, in the relative peace that had followed, they had the luxury of choice. We have time to figure that out, she said finally. Hope may be growing quickly, but we don't have to. Hayes smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Time is exactly what I was hoping for. From the residential section below, a soft golden glow emanated from the quarters, where Hope was being cared for by Dr. Voss. The light pulsed gently, a reminder of the miracle that had brought enemies together and created something new from the ashes of the past. In that moment, standing side by side as they watched over the colony, their colony now, Ula and Hayes shared something beyond words. A vision of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. Not perfect, not without challenges, but full of possibility. And that, Ula reflected, as she reached out to take Hayes's hand, was a prophecy worth believing in.